Greetings. I wanted to spend a minute or two just outlining some of the philosophies I have about the crisis modeling. I have a preference and a perspective to it that I think I'd like to pass on. What you're going to find is that modeling is extremely complex in many cases. I've looked at this many times and said, well, what's going on here? Um, there's different authors and different ways of looking at things, and again, the complexity is all there and dependent on how you want to look at it. Um, some some sort of recognized right away that you're looking for business as usual, but it really doesn't give you any information at all. Um, there is sort of a linear perspective to this in many of these plans, but I really wanted to take two plans. You should really understand that the approach to crisis management changed at a time when the Tylenol crises occurred. Uh, if you should have read about it in so far, but the Tylenol incident is in which some culprits went around to different stores and put arsenic in Tylenol packages, and of course there were several deaths over this. Um, the concept of one in which prior to this the companies were responsive to a crisis. In other words, crisis was an event in which you turned around and responded to. Okay. Um, the only thought was to respond and recover. So they would need an emergency and security response with public relations for tactical support. So they planned on how to respond was really what it boiled down to. After the Tylenol incidents, companies recognized and they started to realize that they needed more. They recognized the need for organizational design as opposed to organizational response. They knew they had to become proactive in order to prevent things. They recognized that crisis management was a process that they could work with and learn from. Most crises are not a sudden event. People began to recognize that there were detectable signals that they could recognize and follow through with to either prevent, preempt, or mitigate, which is to be what the management process was all about. Prevent, preempt, or mitigate. Let's look at two basic models. The Devlin Model, 2007, or the Jacques Model, 2010. Devlin's model is linear. It's pre-crisis, acute crisis, post-crisis. 3 stages. I think of it like healthcare. If I spent time eating too much, smoking, gaining weight, drinking, I'd probably start to see signals about where I'm headed. It would be up to me to identify these signals and try to mitigate, preempt, okay, or prevent altogether. What obviously is going to happen in the acute stage, a heart attack. If you survive, the post-crisis will be to improve yourself, obviously. The post-crisis will be an opportunity for you to look at it and say, I have learned a lesson. But in Devlin's model, it's linear, and it becomes a very linear concept that you don't see any learning from. Jacques' model is slightly different. Obviously, look at it's circular in nature. Okay, and he's broken down the pre-crisis area to 2 elements: crisis preparedness, crisis prevention are the 2 elements that were pre-crisis in terms of Devlin. And look at what it is all about here. You're looking at pre-crisis management for this half. And on the other half, you end up with crisis management. So these two halves are there to prevent and prepare for a crisis. And this half is to work with the crisis and try to mitigate the results. Okay, so when you look at this, it really is one in which the pre-crisis is a lot of planning. It's developing manuals. It's training for situations. The prevention is when you start looking at warning signals, scanning the horizon to see if things are the way they should be, or there could be a problem approaching. You're looking at issue and risk management techniques and being prepared with emergency responses. Okay. The other side of this, of course, is crisis management, in which you've got a system activation and response to what the crisis is all about. You've got recovery business resumptions is really what you're looking for. Post-crisis issue impacts and evaluations and modifications. This evaluation stage is critically important because of the cyclical nature of what you're doing. In other words, once you've evaluated and looked at this, your planning starts all over again. Crises can happen twice. So planning the process, redoing the systems manuals, training has got to change. So we now know more because we've experienced it. So the cyclical nature of crisis is obvious there, and the management has to respond to that. So look at the difference. Jacques sees a pre-crisis in two prevention and preparation areas. The acute area, Devlin, is really the crisis event management. And the post area is going to be post-crisis management. Jacques is cyclical. It reflects a learning process. Okay. I think really what I'm really trying to do is to get you to recognize the model in which has probably got the best benefit for your learning and understanding and preparedness. Okay. Appreciate that. Thanks very much.